The Bee and the Beetle. Sleep, 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 wake. The night is broken by first light. Most of the world is asleep, but the busiest workers have already started their day. Minute by minute, the stillness of the night is replaced by the din of the workday, as thousands of creatures awaken to make their way into the world. Summer has fled, and so have frivolous thoughts, as now all minds must turn to preparing for the cold winter months that are on the horizon. South of the Jubjub village of Horn, lying between the village and the Gramble forest, was a large meadow. When people speak of this area, they are likely to mention the villainy of the Jubjub, or the dark secrets of the Gramble, as both provide mystery and excitement, but it is rare for anyone to remember the meadow. It is an unremarkable and nameless place, but even from such places can we speak of remarkable events. High in the treetops of the Gramble forest, the copper bees build their hives. Copper bees, so named because of the color of their wings, are well organized and hard workers. Some bees are builders and others are soldiers. Some are honeymakers or medics or explorers or drones to the queen. Most bees, however, are food collectors, and this was the duty assigned to a young bee named Diego. He collected food from the meadow to be shared by his hive. Each morning Diego would descend to the meadow, spending hours carefully collecting pollen from various flowers. Every evening he would return home, exhausted, to store the food in the hive's silo, then to feast with his friends and family, and finally to retire for a good night's sleep and ready himself for the next day's collection. He took pride in the day's work, and he treasured his nightly reward. His job allowed him to care for his loved ones, and his evenings were spent in their company. His life served a greater purpose. He provided for those he loved, following in the footsteps of his ancestors. His heart swelled to know that he was one in a long line of bees from his family to do this work, and he worked hard to make sure that the line would continue. And so it was that one morning, while Diego was gathering pollen, he heard a cry from a distance. Unsure of its direction, he kept to his business, but the cry grew louder and more distinguishable, and the voice appeared to be in great distress. Putting his work aside, he flew towards the direction of the cries, and there he found a flower spirit being chased by a giant shaggy spider. Diego wanted to assist the spirit, but he knew he wouldn't win in a fight against the spider, so his best option was to provide a distraction so that the spirit might escape. He flew above the spider, and rolling himself into a ball, he dropped onto its back with great force. Again and again he dropped, and after each drop he would fly up just beyond the spider's reach. This enraged the beast, causing it to lose interest in the spirit and focus solely on Diego. Recognizing the opportunity, the spirit disappeared into the high grass. Diego, seeing this, continued to taunt the spider to ensure the spirit had enough time to safely escape. When he was sure she could not be followed, Diego flew straight up until he was no longer visible to the spider. Then, having escaped danger himself, he returned to his duties. Completing his collection, Diego returned to his hive and performed his nightly ritual. The following morning he returned to the meadow to continue the harvest from the day before. As he flew over the field, his attention was drawn to an exceptionally tall patch of tall grass, and sitting in its center was a flower spirit. Diego flew to her and introduced himself, and the spirit followed, calling herself Lala. She thanked him deeply for his help and put herself in his debt. Diego replied that the gesture was appreciated but unnecessary, and that her friendship would more than cover any debt she might owe him. This brought Lala great delight, and the two became close friends over the following weeks. As the weeks passed, the days grew shorter. Diego continued to work hard, gathering food during the day and spending his evenings in the hive. He enjoyed spending time with his friends and family, but longed for a more intimate relationship. He looked forward to the winter, for that meant he would enter the long sleep of hibernation, which would end with the coming of spring, and that meant the opportunity for courtship. Since meeting Lala, Diego's life was not all field and hive. A few times a week he would find a jibberberry, which he would deliver to Lala in the evening on his way home. Her home was beneath a cackle bush, and was surrounded by an impressive garden of wildflowers and herbs. She would take Diego's berries and make tea, and the two would sit out in her garden and visit, spending a few hours in each other's company, joking and getting to know one another. Diego was always careful to return home before the sun set, for bees are not known to do well in the dark, for at night there were bats and owls and other flying predators who would love to spot a bee outside of its hive. During his visits, Diego would tell Lala of his family and of the hive, and of adventures he had growing up. He told her about the time when, as a young bee, he was almost caught by a graybird. He told her about the time when he found a rare shimmer flower and took it home to his mother. He described how he loved the way the sun shone on the dewdrops in the early morning, and how he loved the smell of sage in the field after each rain. He talked about how he loved his family and his hive, but longed for the intimacy of a spouse. Diego enjoyed when Lala would try to describe the spirit kind, about how she was native to this land and yet came from another, but how they were the same. She said her people were gardeners and described their home on a hill as an eternal garden, alive with every type of flower, of every color imaginable, all shimmering in the sunlight, all swaying with a gentle breeze that would carry their scent throughout the world. She told him her job was to act as a gardener to the wildflowers of this land, and then to take the beautiful flowers to her eternal garden, so that her garden was forever growing. But she also said that these flowers would always remain here as well. Diego did not quite understand everything Lala said, but he loved hearing her describe that garden, and hoped to visit someday. One evening, Diego recounted a story from his childhood about the time he and his friends had a race through a melon patch, and how by the end of the race they had become so sticky with melon juice that it took a week's worth of washing to finally become clean. They were having such a good time reveling in the details of the story that they hadn't noticed that many hours had passed in its telling. In fact, it was well into the night when Diego finally finished and thought of going home. As Diego prepared to leave, Lala asked him about the route he was planning to take back to his hive, given that flying at night was not an option for bees. Having heard his plan to wade through the tall grass, she offered an alternative, suggesting it to be a longer but safer and more interesting path. Lala set him on a wide walkway, leaving her garden and cutting through the thick tall grass. It was well worn and brightly lit by the moonlight, yet this did not calm Diego's nerves about traveling at night. The numerous predators in the air prevented him from flying high, and staying below the tall grass meant he could not see the forest in the distance. So as the path turned, he had little sense of where he was in relation to his hive. Moreover, the shadows in the grass made him anxious, and he imagined beasts jumping out of the darkness to eat him. His tension was steadily growing, but was broken when he heard the loveliest of voices singing at a distance. The song grew louder as Diego continued along the path, until he realized that he must have passed the source because the voice started to diminish. This caused him to pause. On the one hand, he needed to get home, but on the other, he had never heard such a voice, and was very interested to discover the source of the song. Curiosity got the better of him, and he returned to where the voice was loudest. And, summoning his bravery, Diego entered the tall grass to search for the singer. Following the song, he broke through the tall grass and arrived at a clearing, where he found that someone had planted a garden. But what caught his attention was not the garden below, but the gardener above. For high above the clearing flew a luminescent beetle, tending to her garden, singing to her plants to encourage their growth. Diego had heard many things about song beetles before. He had heard they had lovely voices, so lovely that they were cherished by all, even by the vicious shaggy spider and the villainous Jub-Jub. He had heard that they were nocturnal, which explained why he had never seen one before. He had heard they were luminescent, yet he did not expect their white light to be this brilliant. He had indeed heard a great many things, but he had never heard that they were so beautiful. Diego stood there, staring at the beetle for a good long while. He was so mesmerized by the beauty before him that he did not notice the beetle notice him, and he did not notice when the beetle approached him, and he scarcely noticed when the beetle spoke to him. "Hello, bee." The beetle spoke, but no reply, so she repeated, "Hello, bee." Diego became startled when he finally realized he was being spoken to, and he replied, "Hello, Beetle." He hesitated, feeling very shy. He then continued, "I don't mean to stare, but you have a lovely song that drew me in from the path." "Well, thank you, my friend," she replied. "My name's Jimena. Who are you? And how is it that a copper bee is out so late? Aren't you usually tucked away in your hive by this hour?" Diego started to feel a warmth in his face and an uneasiness in his stomach. He felt a panic grow in his chest. "My name? Well, I'm called Diego," he stammered. "And I was out because, well, I was telling Lala about the melons, and the racing, and then we were sticky, and then it was dark, and she told me to take this path." He found himself rambling, and this only made the panicky feeling grow. "But yes, it is late, and I must deliver the food, and then sleep." He turned to leave, but stumbled in the process. "And wash up so you're no longer sticky?" Jimena asked. No, I'm not sticky now," Diego said, falling over himself again. "It was the melons." He jumped back into the tall grass. "You'll have to tell me about it next time," Jimena called out as Diego escaped. Yes, next time," Diego called back. Diego made his way back to Lala's path and started for home. He found himself moving at a much more rapid pace, and didn't once think about the terrible beast that might be lurking in the shadows. He quickly found himself back home. Diego didn't sleep well that night, and he found himself unable to focus on his work the following day. He returned home after his workday and was equally distracted through dinner. All he could think about was Jimena, and when he would get the opportunity to see her again. He suffered another long night, his racing mind preventing sleep from taking hold. The next day he set out to work having a new purpose. He flew to the farthest flower patch in the meadow to gather pollen, keeping his eyes wide open along the way. Just before he reached his destination, he found what he had been looking for, a jibbaberry. Having completed the first part of his plan, he was able to put his mind to his work, and he gathered plenty of food throughout the day. When the workday was complete, Diego took the opportunity to deliver the berry to Lala. Lala was glad to see Diego and greeted him cheerfully. She accepted the berry and made their tea, and the two moved to the garden to visit. Diego struggled to make small talk, which made Lala laugh as she carried the conversation. She was aware of the motive behind Diego's visit. "I'm surprised you didn't come yesterday. I had expected to see you," Lala offered. "Oh, we just saw each other," Diego answered. "You know I normally only visit on days I find a berry." Lala chuckled. "I know. I guess I thought you might have wanted to see me earlier, but luckily you found a berry today." Diego nodded. "So, what did you think of the route?" Lala asked. Good route," Diego responded, dodging. Unsatisfied, Lala pressed. "Did you find anything interesting along the way?" Suspicious of the question, Diego asked, "Interesting? Interesting how?" "Oh, I don't know. Who could possibly know what a bee might find while taking a romantic moonlit stroll?" Lala responded with a laugh. "So," Diego hesitated, "you know who was out there?" "Why, yes," she said, smiling. "Yes, I do." "And you knew beforehand that I would find her?" Diego accused. "You catch on quickly," she teased. "So, fill in the details. How did it go? What do you think?" Diego slumped in his chair. "I can't stop thinking about her." "You're welcome," Lala teased again. "You're going back tonight, yes?" "I don't know. I got so nervous that I couldn't speak, so I ran out of there. You see, I could handle birds and spiders and snakes and bats, but girls? My heart pounds, my mouth gets dry, and I lose the ability to think. I don't know what to do." Lala asked Diego if he was willing to put his trust in her wisdom and allow her to set the stage for their next encounter. Diego agreed. Lala took a jar from the cupboard and took a silver seed from the jar. She handed the seed to Diego and told him that he would be given one seed every day until he had planted a total of 12 seeds. He was to create a clearing in the tall grass just to the south of Jimena's garden, where the seeds were to be planted in a large circle. So Diego had to ensure that the area he cleared was large enough for 12 tall flowers. Lala assured Diego that these seeds would make an ideal gift, and that he should make a proper visit to Jimena the day after the planting of the last seed. Diego thanked Lala and made his way towards Jimena's garden. Once there, Diego started clearing the field to the south of the garden's fence. He worked hard yet silently, as he did not wish to be discovered. After he had cleared a sufficiently wide area, he planted the silver seed and then made his way home. Diego repeated this for the next 11 days. Each day he would return to Jimena's garden and find that the seed he had planted the day before had fully grown and bloomed a beautiful flower, each of a different color. On the 12th day, Diego planted the final seed and returned home. His mind began to race as he knew he was to approach Jimena again the following day. He spent another restless night in his bedroom and another distracted day while performing his duties. That afternoon, he returned to Lala's house, hopeful that she could settle his nerves. Lala greeted Diego cheerfully. She put the kettle on and the two friends settled in the garden patio. Lala tried to calm him by reminding him that he had already put in the work, and all that was left for him was to make his interests known. This was it. The time had come. He would either find his nerve or he wouldn't. The words encouraged Diego. The visit lasted a few hours, filled with the telling of stories and jokes, until the sun began to set. By this time, Diego's heart and mind were settled, and he felt at ease. He bade Lala farewell and made his way to Jimena's garden. Since Diego had been planting the seeds during the day, he had known they had grown quickly, but he never actually saw them grow. Seeing them now, at night, he realized just how special these flowers were. Not only were they of different colors, but they were each luminescent in the dark, and as Jimena flew amongst them, they sang with her, complimenting her song. These indeed were the perfect gift for a song beetle. Diego approached the garden and made his presence known. Jimena quickly flew down, excited to greet him. Diego was taken aback by her enthusiasm, and even more so when she took him by the hand and led him to see her flowers. She exclaimed how she loved them, and how she had always heard tales of songflowers, yet never thought she would see one. She thanked him profusely, all the while squeezing his hand affectionately. "How did you know it was me planting them?" Diego asked. "After the second flower appeared, I would wake up early to watch you from the house," she laughed. It didn't take much detective work. Diego felt a little embarrassed at thinking himself clever, but still very much at ease, especially when she tightened her hand around his. "Am I correct in assuming that Lala gave you the seeds?" Jimena asked. "Yes," Diego confirmed. "She gave them to me." "You know one another, right?" Jimena nodded. "Yes, we're friends. Gardeners tend to know each other well. You must be special to her." "We're very good friends," Diego said proudly. He was honored to have a friend as close as Lala. "So, they glow in the dark, and they know your song?" Diego asked. "Indeed," Jimena exclaimed. "It turns out they know all of my songs. They are very clever, in fact, and it seems they know a good deal about you." "Oh?" Diego asked. "What does that mean?" Jimena explained that when night fell, each new seed would shoot up from the ground and blossom into a brilliant flower, and this flower would sing the most beautiful song about the person who planted it. Therefore, every night, she was able to hear a new song about Diego. The first flower sang about the bee's humility. The second flower sang about the bee's fidelity. The third flower sang about the bee's fortitude. The fourth flower sang about the bee's constancy. The fifth flower sang about the bee's tenderness. The sixth flower sang about the bee's honesty. The seventh flower sang about the bee's kindness. The eighth flower sang about the bee's righteousness. The ninth flower sang about the bee's justice. The 10th flower sang about the bee's faithfulness. The 11th flower sang about the bee's hopefulness. And the 12th flower sang about the bee's love. Diego felt embarrassed that Jimena had come to know so much about him. He felt exposed and vulnerable, but feeling her squeeze his hand again gave him a feeling of acceptance and safety. He had longed for this feeling, and the reality was beyond his expectation. "I guess this means that I'm going to have to get to know you as well as you know me," Diego said. "That may take some time," Jimena responded. "That's fine. I'll bet that it will be worth the investment," Diego answered. "I'll put the kettle on," Jimena replied, smiling. As the weeks passed, Diego and Jimena grew closer. They cherished one another, and they cherished their time together, but they couldn't ignore the difficulties in their path. She was a beetle, and he was a bee. His life revolved around his hive, and hers around her garden. She was nocturnal, and he was not. Their feelings for one another were growing deeper, but the obstacles seemed too great. With winter almost there, they'd both begin hibernation soon. And so they decided to enjoy their time together, and not worry about insurmountable problems until they became insurmountable. To add to his worries, Diego was struggling with his new schedule. He would not neglect his daytime duties, so he would continue to wake up early and work hard until the late afternoon. He would then spend several evening hours with Jimena. By the time he returned to the hive and stored his harvest, he only had a few short hours available for sleep. And so it happened that one afternoon, tired after a long day of working, Diego made his way to Jimena's garden. With his eyes half closed from drowsiness, he did not notice the villainous Jub-Jub child hiding in the tall grass. Before he could react, Diego was taken captive. Several witnesses viewed the abduction. Before long, the news had spread throughout the entire meadow. Lala flew to Jimena's garden to await her friend's awakening and to tell her personally what had happened. In the garden, by the glow of the songflowers, Lala and Jimena held each other and cried for Diego. They tried to console one another and promised to remain hopeful, yet they knew that no one had ever returned after being taken by a Jub-Jub. Jimena held to what little hope she could. Every night she would fly high above her garden, shining her light as brightly as possible, and she'd sing as loudly as she could, along with a chorus of songflowers, hoping that if Diego were trying to find his way home, she could perhaps help guide him. But Diego was not on his way. The Jub-Jub child had Diego, and he had no intention of ever letting him go. The child lived in a 3-story house in the southern outskirts of the village, and he had a room on the top floor with a window overlooking the meadow. He kept his favorite possessions on the windowsill, and now in the center position, he placed a new glass jar. Inside the jar were various leaves and twigs, a small water dish, and a copper-winged bee. Diego was captive, and he could not see a way to escape, at least not without killing himself in the process. He was alone, yet he did not feel alone. He had a clear view of the meadow, and at night he could see the faint multicolored glow of Jimena's garden, and hovering above he could see a pale white light that he knew to be Jimena herself. And although he knew it was not possible, he was sure he could hear her song. He knew that she was calling him home, and he loved her all that much more for it. Diego started sleeping during the day so that he could stay awake throughout the night. If he could not be with Jimena, he could at least watch her light from afar. But with each passing night he grew more concerned. He worried for Jimena because he knew she worried for him, and his concern only grew as he spied the first snow fall. The first night was a light flurry, and he screamed from his jar for Jimena to seek shelter inside of her home. He knew she couldn't hear him, but he felt desperate and helpless and had no other options. The second night was a heavier snowfall, and he wept in his jar as he watched the white light continue to fly in circles until dawn. The third night's snow was even heavier, and Diego went into a full panic when, 4 hours after nightfall, the white light disappeared. Diego lost regard for his own safety. With all of his force, he flew against the side of the jar again and again, until it fell from the windowsill and shattered on the floor. The force from the fall and the glass from the broken jar injured him severely, but he was unconcerned for himself. His only thought now was to escape and find his Jimena. Diego made it out of the house and trudged his way through the snow-covered meadow. The broken glass from the jar injured his wings, leaving him unable to fly. The falling sheets of snow impaired his vision, so he had to navigate purely by instinct. The journey took several hours, and his strength had all but left him when he finally arrived at Jimena's house. He knocked on her door, but there was no answer. He rushed to the circle of songflowers, but there was no sign of her. His thoughts turned to the worst as he noticed large mounds of snow on the ground. Desperate to find Jimena, Diego ignored his exhaustion and the pain caused by his wounds and started digging in the snow. And digging. And digging. Dig. 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 Stop. Sleep. 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 Wake. Diego opened his eyes. Pain surged throughout his body. He was lying on his back, and looking up, he saw the clear blue sky above him. He felt the heat of the sun on his face. He could feel the grass underneath him. He could smell the flowers in the garden. And voices. He could hear voices. Sitting up, he was startled to find that he was surrounded by 12 flower spirits, each of them with a similar aspect to Lala, but each of a different color, and each with a radiant glow. The closest one approached him and told him that he mustn't be afraid, that he was safe, that he would always be safe. "Do you not recognize us?" the spirit asked. "You've known us since our birth. Our mother trusted you to help deliver us. In that place you knew us as flowers, but here we are free to take this form." "Where are we?" Diego asked. "This is the land of the loving sun. This is the land of the everlasting song. This is the eternal garden." The 12 started to sing as they moved to assist Diego. They stood him up, undressed him, and bathed him, and each movement caused him great pain, but their song slowly healed his wounds. He suffered agony in the healing, but when the song was complete, he felt healthier than he ever had before. They dressed him in fine clothes of brilliant colors, and taking him by the hand, they led him to a great hill. There he saw creatures of every sort, all peacefully enjoying the warmth of the sun, enjoying the warmth of each other's company. There were bees and ants, birds and lizards, there were spiders and deer, and there were snakes and dogs, and there were beetles. Diego was taken to one beetle who had been awaiting his arrival, and when she saw him, Jimena ran to embrace her Diego. Soon after there was a crowd around Diego, waiting to greet him. He was hugged by his friends long departed, his grandparents, and all his ancestors. His heart swelled, knowing he was the latest in a long line to be greeted in this manner, knowing that he would forever be in the company of those he loved most, and who loved him. And so they stood on that hill, shining in the vibrant colors of their fine clothes, warmed by the living sun, warmed by each other's company, their laughter carried by the breeze, a song that would never end.